life helping someone else to understand this, like, really, really shitty thing that's happening, and that we need to hear women and protect women's health care and women's rights over their own bodies. And I think that's the kind of son I want to raise. So I'm glad that one of my children is already doing it.
Yeah, and he's loved.
Yeah, I definitely feel that. I have to say that I know you, as you already know, but for your listeners, I know you from a craft community and the support of other women who have had these kinds of experiences and who haven't, but just really felt passionately that it was something that they were emotionally open to being empathetic about, was so important, and it really lifted us up during all that time. So it's so appreciated, and I truly, truly don't know what I would have done without that community of women.
Yeah, even having not gone through something horrific myself, thank God, in the past few years, having that community, I think, has been so important. Just like getting through, the last however many fucking months it's been of Trump. Like, how do you, without knowing that there are good people and strong women out there, it's hard to deal with all of this. It's hard to deal with it, even knowing that, but it would be harder.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. Well, both of us have kids who are going to be up in the morning, I'm sure. So.
Kidding me? I mentioned to you as we were setting up the interview, my 2-year-old sleeps like a newborn infant, so she should be up any minute now.
All
well, thank you so much, Kelly. I'll talk to you soon.
Yep, thank you.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this special segment of Two Broads Talking Politics. I am one of your co-hosts, Sophie. Out of all the abortions in 2011, 92% of them were in the first trimester, but 1.2% of them were at 21 weeks or later. I have with me a special guest, McKenzie, to tell us about her story of having an abortion at 21 weeks. Welcome, McKenzie.
Hi.
So tell me about your experience.
Well, I got pregnant in 2006. My husband and I had been trying to conceive, so we were very excited, and it seemed like everything was going along normally. We were seeing a nurse midwife since we were, low risk, first pregnancy, standard stuff. And there were, in retrospect, there were some early warning signs that something was wrong, but it wasn't clear at the time that they were. Like, she wasn't able to palpate the top of my uterus above my pubic bone by the point in the first trimester when normally she would, but that happens in about 20% of cases, and it's usually because a woman's uterus just is tipped back, which can happen during pregnancy, and it's fine. It's not a cause for concern.
There's a lot of stuff like that in the first trimester where, they expect to be able to do something like find the heartbeat or whatever, but it's actually pretty normal. It's normal to be abnormal.
Mm-hmm. And in that case, she did get out what they called the Fisher-Price ultrasound that they had at that practice because it was entirely low-risk patients, and checked for the heartbeat, and there was a normal, strong heartbeat, so she said, okay, that's what I needed to hear to be reassured. And that was the appropriate standard of care, but it turned out that everything was not okay. When I got into the second trimester, I had another visit with her, and she still couldn't find the top of my uterus. And the heartbeat was still there and still strong, but at that point it was not normal to not have had my uterus grow to that extent and to not be showing at all. And so she said, well, I don't know what's going on, and it could be a big deal, or it could just be that we estimated the conception date wrong, which is not unusual, but you need to go get a real ultrasound and start figuring this out. So we got the referral, and then we got an appointment at an ultrasound center, where they just do ultrasounds all day, every day. And went and did that, and then she got the results back from that and came to talk to us. And at that center, they thought that everything looked normal except that there was maybe one cystic kidney, and that the baby looked about 2 weeks less developed than it should have at that point in the pregnancy. Which did start to set off some alarm bells, because I was really pretty sure about the date of conception and that it was not off by at least 2 weeks. But that still seemed like the most likely thing. One cystic kidney would not be that huge of a deal in itself, but our midwife said, well, okay, now I'm referring you to the maternal fetal medicine center because you need to go get the real ultrasound and figure out what's going on. So I did that and went to that visit, and they had the fancy 3D ultrasound, and the technician just kind of looked pretty worried and went out to talk to the doctor, who came back in and led off with, there's no good news that I can give you, and told me that there were multiple abnormalities incompatible with life. There was a severe intrauterine growth restriction. Both kidneys were extremely cystic and looked to be basically non-functional. It was a girl. Her brain had never divided into two hemispheres even, and there were extreme abnormalities in everything else he could see except the heart.
So she would not have been able to live?
No. So it was clear from looking at the ultrasound that was not going to lead to a live baby. So he took an amniocentesis, and I was not in a state of mind to be able to make any decisions at that point. So the doctor said, okay, we'll do the amniocentesis and we'll talk to you again when we get the results, but I have to recommend terminating this pregnancy on the basis of what I see on this ultrasound, both because of the baby's prognosis and because of that prognosis for your health and safety.
It would have made it harder for you to be well throughout the entire pregnancy. It would have been more dangerous.
It would. Talking about it later, when I was more in a state of mind to be processing additional information, what they're concerned about is that a miscarriage late in pregnancy is not the same medically as a miscarriage early in pregnancy. So if the baby is extremely likely to die, then obviously you're at high risk for that. And the complications that are most likely are either that you have an incomplete miscarriage and you retain some tissue, which is a great way to get sepsis, or that you have placental separation problems, which is a great way to have a hemorrhage. And either of those obviously is life-threatening. So there's no immediate risk to the mother's life, but there was only risk, essentially. There was no chance for a good outcome. And continuing the pregnancy would have put me at high risk for having to have an emergency hysterectomy, or for dying, or for having other really bad health outcomes.
So when the amniocentesis came back, then you knew?
Then we knew. I still sort of felt like I wouldn't be comfortable terminating the pregnancy without the definitive diagnosis. There was part of my brain saying, what if the ultrasound's wrong, even though I knew it wasn't. And it turned out that she had triploidy, which it's 3 full sets of chromosomes instead of 2. They estimate that it happens in about 1 to 2% of pregnancies, 1 to 2% of conceptions, most often when 2 sperm reach the egg at the exact same moment. Usually that embryo would never even get to implantation. Almost always you'd miscarry in the first trimester because it's 100% fatal. About 1 in 10,000 goes past the first trimester. The exact abnormalities that you get are random. It just depends on what combination you get, but it's always fatal. It's always extremely severe. So at the day that we got those results back, we really wanted to get going on terminating the pregnancy. And the options were to do a dilation and evacuation, which is more what people would think of as an abortion, or to do an induced stillbirth, which is essentially inducing labor when you know that the baby won't survive the birth. And we opted for the latter basically because we could get it done faster. And at that point, I just wanted it to end.
Yeah. So what was that experience like? Horrible, I imagine.
It was terrible. It's, there hasn't been a day since then that I haven't thought about my daughter. We named her Alyssa. There hasn't been a day when I couldn't get myself into tears, in less than a minute thinking about it. It was January 4th, 2007. That was more than 10 years ago, so I don't cry about it every day anymore. Fortunately, because I was able to get appropriate medical care, we were able to do that delivery in the hospital where they were fully prepped to do a transfusion if they needed to, which was the big concern during the delivery. And so I was able to conceive again very quickly, and we had another child, my oldest son, in December of 2007. So I was able to have the best possible outcome, given the circumstances, and stay healthy and have more children. But it's an incredibly painful experience to lose a child.
Would you say that your experience changed the way that you thought about abortion, or reinforced anything, or do you feel exactly the same way?
It reinforced, I was pro-choice before. I'd always been pro-choice, but had also tended to be one of those people who would say that I, supported the right to choose, but I would never choose an abortion myself. And that changes pretty quickly when your doctor says, I don't know how you feel about abortion, but I have to recommend one regardless. And it's definitely reinforced my pro-choice position. I still donate to Planned Parenthood regularly because I ended up, by the time that we'd done all the testing, got the results, and had done the preparation for the stillbirth that's medically necessary, I had that termination in my 21st week. And it's terrifying to think about what could have happened had I not been able to do that. And where I live now, with laws that have been passed since then, I would not be able to have that procedure. I would have had to either rush it before we had the diagnosis, and I would probably still be wondering if I'd really made the right decision, or I would have been risking some really bad outcomes, and I would have been dragging on the worst experience of my life.
What would you want to say to your elected officials about this experience? What would you want them to know when they're making decisions about the legality of abortion?
That the laws that they're writing don't take into account the realities of people's situations. And it sounds great to say we're going to protect babies, and, babies past 20 weeks, we're going to take care of them, but the harm that these laws can do is something to think very seriously about. And it's a decision that needs to be left to a woman and, in my case where my husband's involved, her family, and her doctors, her medical team. And to say that doctors can't provide their patients the treatment that they think is medically appropriate is horrifying.
You said that you give to Planned Parenthood regularly.
I do.
Is that what you'd recommend people? What would you recommend that people do if they want to help work to keep abortion safe and legal?
I recommend donating to organizations that are working every day to support this, for sure, when and as you can. I recommend giving your time if you have time to give. I recommend contacting your legislators and letting them know your opinion about this and letting them know your stories. I think a lot more people know someone who's had a late-term abortion than believe that they do. I think it's rare, but people think that it's rarer than it is. A lot of people know someone who's been helped by this care and just don't know it. it's easy to feel ashamed about it and to feel afraid about talking about it, but letting people